Looks like Caleb's about to take a page out of R. Kelly's book because he believes he can fly. Let's get started. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Thumb Together. My name is Andrew Fantasia, and today we're going to be talking about Westworld Season 4, Episode 3, Année Folle Together. I apologize for that French accent, but if you like this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. As far as Season 4 is concerned, so far, this has been the best episode. It feels like it's getting back to the fun mindfuckery that Westworld is so good at, where things are happening at different points in time. Things you think are happening in one situation are actually not happening in that situation, but in a whole other one, they're just so good at that. As far as the title is concerned, Année Folle translates to the crazy years or the crazy times, which is the term the French would actually use to describe the 1920s, which if you've seen things like The Great Gatsby or anything Great Gatsby adjacent, you know that in France, particularly Paris, in the 1920s, shit was wild. Now, we're not in Paris, we're in a facsimile of Chicago, but that doesn't stop stuff from getting wild. So this episode is split into 3 different parts of story. Let's begin with Caleb's wife and daughter. His daughter Frankie is a smart kid, and she quickly realizes it when a robot kills the man who's supposed to be protecting them and assumes his identity. What we end up with is a really scary situation with 2 vulnerable humans and a robot whose motivations are unknown, but probably not very friendly. And their story abruptly cuts to black when this robot man finds poor Frankie hiding in a closet. Ooh. Now, at this point, we jump over to the second of the 3 stories told in this episode, which is all about our friends Maeve and Caleb. Maeve and Caleb are having a great time enjoying themselves in the Golden Age Park. At least I think they're enjoying themselves. You can't really tell with Nolan characters. They're usually very stoic. I think Maeve just has fun wherever she goes. She just seems like that cool kind of person who's just delighted by anything and everything, even if it is in a mostly sardonic way. I know I'm delighted by seeing the park and how it echoes Westworld and Sweetwater, and more importantly, seeing how Maeve reacts to all of these things echoing her, how she reacts to the facsimile of her in this park and the facsimile of Hector and of Clementine. It's all there, right up to the Dolores dropping something and having it being picked up by a Teddy character. It's all just copy-pasted. Clearly, Charlotte Hale did not hire a new storyteller. They just used whatever Lee Sizemore had lying around and slapped a fresh coat of Chicago 1928 on it, which means we get this groovy scene where the bootlegger comes in and starts shooting up the place. And it's just like that absolutely fantastic part of episode 1, except now instead of a player piano playing Painted Black, which is very hard to say, I can't believe I didn't stumble when I said that, the player piano is actually playing Enter Sandman. I think I prefer Painted Black, but the Enter Sandman was pretty cool to hear. The anachronisms with the music, Westworld does it so well, and it hasn't done it in a long time, so I'm glad it's back. But the layers of this juicy robot onion keep getting peeled back when Maeve and Caleb, they go down into what they think is the service area of the park, but it's not. It's part of the park. And this, folks, is a great example of Westworld blowing your mind. Remember, these are the Nolans and Joy we're talking about here. These are the people who gave us Inception. You're going to have moments that do this to you, and I'm so glad we're seeing them again. A park within a park, an Easter egg with a hidden narrative, and that hidden narrative is the Westworld Massacre has become a park attraction itself, which is so sick and twisted. I can't believe people are actually paying to do this. Well, they are super rich people, so maybe I can believe that they'd actually pay to do this. Rich people are weird. And B, it kind of tells us that Charlotte Hale, or Charloris, has a sick, twisted sense of humor about the whole thing. She obviously remembers doing it because it's part of her personality, and she's playing it up for laughs to attract more humans. Is it because she knows humans are bloodthirsty and she's judged them as such, so she's kind of laying that as a honeypot, like, hey, you like blood and gore and slaughter of innocents? let's literally make that a park. If it is, she's making this cool little statement while at the same time using it to capitalize off of whatever her plan is. I think this says a lot about Charloris, and I love that it's here. I love that it exists. This is one of the funniest things that I think Westworld has ever done. And when our heroes finally descend to the real sub-level, the real engineering level of the park, what do they find? They find creepy-ass drone husks doing creepy-ass drone husk things, like creating a parasite and putting it inside black goo and feeding that black goo to a bunch of flies. And now we start to see and learn more about the fly thing. So if you weren't convinced that the flies were controlling the humans as a sort of nanobot cloud, it's all here in black and white for you now, baby. But what I didn't expect is that it looks like these flies are real organic flies. I thought they were robot flies, and they still theoretically could be. They are being fed this stuff, so I'm assuming that organic flies wouldn't have to eat. So I think it looks like Delos is actually just grabbing a bunch of real flies and feeding them this virus and controlling the flies via the virus and then controlling the humans via the flies. There's a lot of steps to this because it's Westworld, so of course there are. But the flies seem to really love Caleb because he was the only human present, I think. The flies are drawn via the parasites to the nearest flesh bag to be like, I'm having that flesh bag, it's mine now, and I'm going to use it to further Delos' goals. Terrifying. I'm never looking at a fly the same way again after this show. What's even more terrifying is we see the results of this, man. We see all these people, all these humans put in these situations where the flies are clearly in control and they're making them do stuff with blocks and then they're making them shoot themselves in the head, except for one particular person. He looks a hell of a lot like Frankie, Caleb's daughter, and he goes in there in a panic, but then no, Maeve figures out it's not Frankie, it's a host of Frankie. This was all, as Admiral Akbar would say, a contrived situation to make one person think they were in one thing when they actually are being lured into another. I think that's the actual quote from Return of the Jedi. It's been a minute. And while the Man in Black shows up to fight Dolores and we get this cool robot-in-robot smackdown, they really should call this show Rock'em Sock'em Robots when you think about it. Caleb's quote-unquote daughter is unleashing the flies who, very painfully it looks like, take over his body. Now, we've seen this a lot in the trailers, so it's not a shock that Caleb gets the fly treatment, but it still leaves us with our big lingering question, which is my first big question of the week. Why does Charloris want Caleb? Is it because Maeve is the biggest threat to her right now, so she wants to use Caleb to get to Maeve? If so, I get that, but I feel like there are other ways you can handle Maeve without resorting to just taking over this guy. I feel like there's more to it than that, and we haven't seen the bigger picture yet. All I know for sure is by next week, Caleb will be a fly on the wall, and that's gonna be frightening, to say the least. But you know what's even more frightening than flies taking over human bodies? The apocalypse, which it looks like has happened in storyline number 3. Yes, we are finally caught up to Bernard and Stubbs. Dusty Bernard has waken up in Dusty Motel, greeted by a suspiciously clean Stubbs, who says, hey, it's been years. Welcome back to the real world. Now, Bernard has been in what I incorrectly referred to as the Valley Beyond last week. What it's actually called is the Sublime, talking to Akechita, who's back, and it was so nice to see him again, talking about how there's all these possibilities and parallel universes, and this is something that I gotta admit I'm not a fan of. When Bernard comes out, living through, as far as we can tell, countless timelines in a very Doctor Strange in Infinity War kind of way, where he has seen a bajillion possible outcomes and now he knows everything that will happen. And the reason I don't like this is because I have devoured plenty of science fiction before, and fantasy for that matter, where characters have had this ability, where they have been entirely prescient and they know exactly what's going to happen all the time, whether it's because of time travel or magic or what have you. And I find it insufferable. I really do. I'm not a huge comic book guy, but one of the few comic books that I ever did pick up and read all the way through was Cable and Deadpool from the mid-2000s. And the character of Cable is like this. He is a time traveler from the future, and he knows everything that's ever going to happen all the time. And my God, it made me hate this man. He was the most annoying character that I think I have ever read in fiction. I could not stand him because everything that's going on, he's just like, yeah, I know. I always know. I know everything. I know what you're going to say, and I know what she's going to do, and I know how he's going to react because I'm perfect in every way. Haha. It bugs me. Not as much as being devoured by flies probably bugs Caleb, but it bugs me. So I hope and I pray that they don't turn Bernard into that same kind of insufferable jerk. So far, it looks like they're leaning in that direction, so I just hope they pump the brakes on that. But in the meantime, we are introduced to this cool new apocalyptic world. And this is where I have my second question of the week. And this question might absolutely already have been answered in the episode, but here's the thing. Here where I live in Ontario, Canada, there was a huge internet shortage this weekend that made the news. It was so big that millions of people had their internets and phones and TV knocked out. And everything's not 100% back to normal yet, including my cable. So when I was watching the episode, there was a lot of sound dropping out and a lot of freezing and stuttering, and I feel like I missed quite a bit. So maybe this has been answered in the scene where Bernard wakes up and talks to Stubbs, because that's where I experienced a lot of the stuttering. But my question is, exactly how long has Bernard been in the Sublime? We know it's been 8 years between season 3 and season 4, but I feel like with all the overgrowth and dust that you see around that motel room and the fact that it just feels like an apocalyptic landscape here, we're talking more than 8 years. Are we talking 100 years? Are we talking more? I don't know, but this world has a whole lot of dust, Mad Max style, and it has a whole lot of rebels in these badass dune buggies who lead a rebellion out in the middle of the desert where apparently a weapon is buried. And this is where we meet our new characters, one of them played by Aurora Perrineau, who we don't know her name yet, but if you look up her credits on her Wikipedia page, it says that this character's name is simply the letter C. Another thing they're keeping mum on is what her rebel group is rebelling against. We don't know the state of this world he's woken up in. So that's my third question is, what's the deal with these rebels? And that leads pretty much right away into the fourth question this episode raised. Bernard talks about a weapon buried in the sand. What is this weapon he's talking about? If by taking over Caleb and killing Maeve, Charloris manages to take over the world and cause a robo-apocalypse of some kind, and the humans are living out on the fringes, and this is the future we're seeing, then in that case, what has to end up happening is we have to fast forward everything. We have to fast forward Caleb and Maeve's storyline to this point and have some kind of convergence where they meet up with Bernard and Stubbs and work with the rebels to take down Delos, which leaves us with a conundrum because we still have this Christina character and Teddy to worry about. So maybe they are the key to everything. I don't know. All I know is this episode was fan-friggin-tastic. This is my favorite episode of Westworld this year, like I said, but it might even be in my top 5 favorites just because of how much ground it lays and how much it embraces the idea of things not being what they seem, both chronologically and from a storytelling point of view in general. I love when Westworld does this. They are the Iron Chef of cooking recipes that you don't expect. So I'm looking forward to next week's midpoint episode a bunch. I'm going to try to have that analysis up as soon as I can, though next week work scheduling is very, very tricky for me, so it might come out a little later. But that's okay. As we learned from this show, time is all just relative anyway. So that has been Westworld Season 4, Episode 3, Année Folle. Again, I think I'm saying that right. My name is Andrew Fantasia. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you here next time. And until then, these violent delights have violent ends.